Hello. Now I'm going to give a brief introduction to mass organizing. I'm going to talk a little bit about the difference between revolutionary organizing and mass organizing. And don't be worried, I'm going to get in depth into most of these sections later, but now I just want to make the real distinction between mass organization and revolutionary organization. So, in that sense, I'm going to talk about the types of organization. I'm going to talk about the types of work, and I'm also going to raise a few side points. But basically, it's about mass organization and revolutionary organization. So, what's the goal of all this? The goal is revolution, and whether it's revolution through peaceful means or violent means is up to you. I am very, very skeptical of revolution through peaceful means, but if you think that's the way to go, then I say do it. So, in the types of organizations, revolutionary organizations are organizations that realize that capitalism itself is the problem. And we're not going to reach any real substantive conclusions or solutions that fix the problem until we get rid of the entire capitalist system. So, what does it take to be a revolutionary organization? First off, you have to openly declare yourself against capitalism. Capitalism is the problem, and we've got to try our best to be the cure, but you have to be a revolutionary, even a peaceful Gandhi-esque revolutionary, to actually achieve that. So, what does a revolutionary organization do? And I know this sounds really stupid and very simple, but first off, it actually helps to meet and study and learn. At least once a month, meet and study and learn one work that you view as revolutionary. Now, I don't care if this is Marx, Lenin, Mao, Stalin, or if it's Kropotkin, or if it's some sort of peaceful revolutionary. You've got to meet and study, because the study and the theoretical discussion about that study will help inform your revolutionary practices and will get it started. And for many people around the country, you have a group of friends that want revolution but just don't know where to start. Here's something really easy to do: is start and say, let's meet up and read the Communist Manifesto. And I obviously have problems with the Communist Manifesto and why it's written and how in-depth it is, but just go with whatever. And when you meet and study and learn, be very conscious of how what you're learning affects what is happening around you. And try and think of ways that what you're learning affects what's around you. Now, this is not to say that every revolutionary work is going to be the same, is going to have the same context. The fact of the matter is, you may read or study something, and maybe it wasn't even your suggestion, and it just doesn't help at all. It's important that you be realistic and concrete about this, but it's important to study revolution. And I'm a firm believer that without revolutionary theory, there cannot be revolutionary practice. And maybe you disagree, but then you should convince the people there to study something that disagrees with it and learn where everyone's at. Now, that's a study group, and that's great, but it's not make it a revolutionary organization. The other thing you need to do is you need to discuss how you're actually going to take it to the masses. And by this, I mean people in general, but also you need to make a concrete plan of how you're going to take it to the masses and carry it out. And once you've created a mass organization, which again I will talk about in just a second, it's not that a revolutionary organization comes before the mass organization necessarily, but if you're interested in revolutionary organizing, that's what I'm talking about. And if you're interested in revolution, that's what I'm talking about. And so the mass organization comes later. But the fact is, these two are dialectically connected. You cannot have a real revolutionary organization that is somehow separate from a mass organization. And I'll talk more about it, but I'm just talking to you now as a revolutionary what a mass organization, what revolutionaries should do in a mass organization. And with that, you should discuss what actions the mass organization should take. And this may sound like a secret cabal of revolutionaries. Well, maybe. This can sound to you like Leninism that wants to put itself above people. It can also sound like Bakunin's Invisible Committee, which is an anarchist idea, which is the revolutionaries are the ones that take the most action and do the most in the mass organization. And I'll leave off on the revolutionary organization for now. I'll talk about it more in upcoming lectures. But now let's talk about the mass organization. What is the mass organization? Now, this is very, 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 very important. It should remain independent. Even if the first meeting of the mass organization is everyone who's a revolutionary and agree that you're all revolutionaries, you all are being part of the mass organization in order to better fight capitalism, the mass organization should be independent. And that means that a lot of times you'll get people that you don't know, and you'll also sometimes get people you really don't like who play a leadership role in this mass organization. If you think they're wrong in the mass organization, you need to be able to demonstrate how they're wrong. It's not enough to say, well, this is our group and we as revolutionaries started it and we don't agree with, I don't know, Bill, because Bill's a capitalist suck up or whatever. You should be able to demonstrate how, one, their position is wrong, two, how they're not encouraging struggle of the mass organization to achieve its ends, and three, be just very aware that this is a mass organization. You're going to have people with a lot of different, often contradictory ideas that show up. As a revolutionary in the mass organization, you should do as much work as possible. Now, I'm not saying that you take on every single task. If, I'm sorry, Bill, but if Bill proposes an idiotic idea that doesn't hurt the organization overall, but Bill proposes an idea that is totally wrong, is a drain of resources, you go, hey, Bill, that's a good idea. Why don't you do it and come back to us and tell us how it worked? And I've been in innumerable mass organizations where someone says, that's not the real problem. The real problem is blah, blah, blah. Here in Chicago, in fact, someone was like, oh, that's dumb. What we should do is pass out food on the L. And they wanted everyone to get behind passing out food, which can be revolutionary. In this case, it wasn't. And my response, as the response of many other people, were, well, okay, why don't you go do that and then tell us how it turns out? And it didn't turn out well. But don't be carried along by ideas just because it's whatever they want, or there's a few individuals or very vocal individuals who are constantly pushing it. And this brings us to how to understand how many of these people view things. And I'm going to use three terms: advanced, intermediate, and backwards. And I don't mean these as moral terms. They are not moral terms. Someone can be advanced in one thing, intermediate in another, and backwards in another. It totally happens. First is the advanced. And these are the most active people, of which you should definitely be part of. They do the most work, and they also have the most militant line. A really great example of this is with the anti-war work I've done. Generally, people want to say, bring our troops home, which is good. I would like all of the U.S.'s troops out of other countries, but the more advanced line is no war, because that doesn't say whether we should support our troops, bring them home. I, for one, and this is just my opinion, I certainly do not support ours, or the U.S. troops, and I don't support them invading, overthrowing, occupying other countries at all. So if I say troops out now, that is a more advanced line than support our troops, bring them home. And you'll find it's very clear people who take a more militant line and people whose line is either ultimately supportive of the system or just awful. And that's up to you to determine which it is. Also, the most advanced help lead. They come in, they support you when you're right. They take you aside after the meeting and go, yeah, I really didn't think this was right, and here's why. They're out there in the streets, they're out there carrying the banner, and they're really interested in doing the actual work that you're trying to do. And the key is you should unite with anyone who has an advanced line. And you yourself should hopefully be advanced in what you're trying to do. So you should unite the advanced. The intermediate, and again, not a moral claim, has general ideas. They're like, wow, this war really sucks. It's draining money. It's killing innocent people. But they don't have what they should do, why it's happening, but they just want it to stop. I'm using this as an example. But they have general ideas. And they do work. They're not as advanced. They're not the advanced. You can expect them to show up to a protest. You can accept them or expect them to post it on Facebook, and just maybe you'll get them to invite friends or go flyer or whatever. And that's what you should expect. These are people who have their life, have their family, have their job, and this is something they care about. And I'm not saying that, oh, the advanced cares more than the stupid intermediate, but they have other obligations. In some cases, and I've concretely seen this with immigration. In fact, some people just can't be the advanced for immigration issues. They can't lead a militant protest or march because if they're arrested, either they or their family faces deportation. And that's not, again, a moral claim. I don't want to encourage you to think, oh, well, if you really cared, you'd risk deportation. That's absolutely unreasonable, although some people do, and they should be supported in every respect that they're correct and right. But you just have to know that this is for revolutionaries, and not everyone's a revolutionary. You have to accept people can do certain things. They're happy to do certain things. In fact, I have a lawyer friend who was absolutely vital in our immigration struggles and was on the ball and was willing to give immigration advice, political advice. He was very deeply connected with the Democratic Party. I don't know if he was a member, but he was deeply connected and was more than willing to give us the info on what they were thinking, what they were talking about. But he was not willing to go to any of the protest marches that could lead to him being arrested or disbarred. And you just have to accept that. And now there's the backwards. The backwards has incorrect strategy, tactics, or goals. And their methods are generally not so great. And to say this is not to criticize the backwards. It's not to say, oh, those stupid backwards people, we're so much better than them. There may be very good reasons why they're backwards, and there may not be. They may just be a crank. For example, I did most of my organizing in Utah, and I've spent my entire life up until recently in Utah. And I had someone who emailed everyone who was involved that said I was a communist, I was a plant from a communist group who was trained in Chicago, and I was coming there to take over their movement. Which is really weird because there was no movement before me and a group of other people started organizing it. But they said this, and they didn't really, they never came to, they came to protest a few times, but they were not part of the process. And instead were outside attacking whatever. It was completely illegitimate, dishonest, but they wanted to say they were the most revolutionary, and so they were right, everyone else was wrong. It made them completely backwards. On the other hand, I've had people who were completely backwards in some respects. I'm using the immigration study or the immigration protests we had because it's really fresh in my mind, especially with Biden's horrible treatment of immigrants already. A man engaged in immigrant rights struggles, and he was really great. He would talk to the press. He said all the right things, but the way he treated women in the movement, and not even in the movement, but beyond, was pretty bad. And so we recognized, um, look, here's the thing, you've you've got to focus on immigrant rights struggles, and we're going to take you aside. Um, and I meant take them aside. Like, I didn't publicly denounce them in any meeting and say, yeah, this behavior, it's fine if you do it on your own business, in your own time. It's really not, but you can't be doing it as part of our group. And you can't be doing it within the group. And in fact, ultimately, this sort of backwards behavior ultimately changed, and he ultimately adopted a much better attitude, specifically towards women, than he did originally. And that's the general, like, disposition of the backward. It doesn't mean, like, screw you forever, but they shouldn't be given a wide berth. It's not all of our ideas are equally good. These were bad ideas, and so we needed to avoid them. And so, alternately, there was a case where someone had really backward ideas, and we took them aside and said, "Hey, you're saying things that aren't real good towards women, towards immigration, immigrants. Um, it's really bad." And they kept doing it, and then eventually we had to bring it up in meetings. We're like, "No, that's completely wrong, and you're wrong for saying it." And by that time, we had earned the trust of the intermediate group, i.e., our immigrant rights group, that when we were like, "No, I'm sorry, you're wrong," even though on paper what they were saying, which was common at the time, made sense, that we needed to support the Democrats and helping to get sensible immigration passed. Everyone in the group was like, "No, that is absolutely wrong. We don't, I may not be a crazy communist like this guy, but that's wrong. I don't want that. I'm not listening to you." And eventually he got, he basically lost interest because it ceased to be a platform for him to make his claims. And to put it really bluntly, the backwards should be isolated. Now, to what extent that is informal, or that you talk to them on the side, or that they don't get invited to things, or whether it's you in a meeting denouncing them, that really depends on your personal judgment. I don't know what to tell you, but what I'm trying to do is give a blueprint overall. This is the most discouraging thing I can say, but it's true. You have to use your judgment, and you have to decide whether or not what the correct course of action is to take. I am not Lenin reborn or anything like that, and I certainly don't have the time or wherewithal to help you choose who's backwards and who's intermediate and who's advanced. I just don't, and so you'll have to use your judgment, as do we all. And again, I can't stress this enough. What's important is these categories are not fixed. Some groups use this, but then they refer to the communists as the conscious element. That's simply not the case. You can see in some cases people are super advanced. I was doing student work with someone who was a communist, and we managed to defend the immigrants in their state. But then after, he was like, I'm out. Now, of course, he would be conscious because he studied Marx and Lenin and Mao, but that's really not the best way to think of things, and it's not really accurate. What you have to understand is people vary, and myself, I vary between various groups. Some things I really, really care about, I pay a lot of attention to, and other things I'm not very good at. And you yourself are going to find some things that you're really good at, but then other things you will absolutely be backwards. My recommendation for communists or anarchists or revolutionaries is to try and keep an open mind. And when someone criticizes you, see why they criticize you and talk with them about why they're criticizing you. And if it makes sense, then change your behavior. But if it doesn't make sense, go, no, you're wrong. And that's kind of hard to do, but it is what it is. Now, I'm going to talk about the different types of work. And wow, they're easy, hard, and union, which is super hard, expert, difficulty. And I'll just talk very briefly about it. Keep in mind, I've done most of this work. Oh, and there's also like special work, but I'll talk about that. I've done all 5 of these, and they are seriously have very difficult or different difficulty levels, but I'm going to talk a little bit about them. Keep in mind, this is not everything. I'll definitely go through this individually. Each section will come up in the coming weeks, but let me just start. The easiest work to do is student work. And by that, I mean you're a student at a university, you hold protests, rallies. This can vary. It can be everything from particular policies on campus to sexism on campus, to racism on campus, to anti-war work on campus, to supporting the union workers on campus. I, in fact, once led unsuccessfully, I will say, but I led actions to try and get the cosmetology school of the school I was going to continue to be part of it, because it was the least expensive cosmetology school. It was the most open, and it worked really well for those students. And the president of the college was basically getting rid of the cosmetology school because she didn't like how it made the school look. And so there were actual protests to defend the cosmetology school. I'm just using this as an example. If you're going to school now, there's certainly something on campus that is bad news. But even if there isn't, police brutality, Biden's innumerable new wars that he's hatching, they all count. The next I did was anti-war work. And anti-war work, in a certain sense, is hard to get people to understand why this is bad, but it's easier than other things. For example, when you're doing anti-war work, nobody wants to send their kids off to die in a foreign land. And plenty of people just don't want another war. So these people are immediately predisposed towards anti-war work. But in addition, you can use this to generate a greater understanding of why capitalism is constantly at war, constantly invading, and also, and really, really bad to say, but the truth is, if you totally screw up an anti-war movement, wait a year, and there'll be a new war, and so you can learn from your mistakes, and you can do better. What's really hard work to do is immigrant rights work and police brutality. Immigrant rights work is very hard for a number of reasons. The first and most deeply difficult part of immigrant rights work is these people that you're fighting to defend, they face deportation and in some cases execution, murder, by joining your cause. And so it's very important to be careful about what sort of work they're doing, who's legal, who's not just legal but a citizen, and be very, very careful with undocumented workers. And that's very important. But I'll talk about that more in another video. The next is police brutality. Yes, capitalists endlessly use their ground soldiers to kill us, to kill black and brown people primarily. This is the thing. The question of police brutality ceases to be just an abstract question when you're talking to the mother, the father, the cousins, siblings of someone who's been murdered by the cops. And you have to respect that. And that doesn't mean you necessarily go with whatever they say is the most important thing right now, because they may not know. And they may not be aware of other structural issues. But it takes a great deal of care in dealing with it. Next is union work. And this is somewhat of a difficult question, but I want to pose that there are two different kinds of union work. First is being part of an actual union. Which is absolutely essential for union work. If it means doing what's required of you. I myself was part of a union in Utah, and it was not a particularly active union struggle kind of thing, but occasionally there were questions of how to vote on this or that contract. And, being informed about that was important. Also, there were special union projects. I was involved in salting the non-union, not to be too harsh of it, scabs. What became of my salting? Not much, because some in the union leadership didn't really want to take action. It was a failure. I'm going to say it's a failure. But it was what it was. And I did it, I attempted to do it, and I worked really hard at doing it, but it just didn't pan out. And so there's sometimes that union work means just being part of a union. If you're a teacher, very much so, over the last 6 years, you've seen a huge rise in teachers going out, being active. Part of it is just being the sort of union member that supports that sort of strike, that sort of fight for a good union contract. But it is what it is. Actual union work is the union is your main focus. And it doesn't include just the local. It includes the national or international union. This work is incredibly hard and incredibly difficult and incredibly unrewarding, depending on the union. But it needs to be done. So if you want to engage in this work, I'm not going to talk about any of the work I've done with this because it's ongoing. What I will say, and I'll leave all names out, I have numerous friends who decided to get a job at Amazon specifically for the sake of unionizing them both locally in their particular location, but also to make it a national union. And I wish them the best. You know who you are. Godspeed. Also, additionally, there may be sometimes you need to do special work. This will primarily be done by the red group, but it may be big enough that you need to form a separate group. And this can include anything from rent control housing, school boards, or anything else that doesn't fit any general mass group, or is a temporary kind of like one-off thing. And you know, it's very easy to think, oh, well, I'm going to do special work. I'm going to do special work. Special work is just that. It's special. It arises from certain conditions. For example, one of the members who was involved in the police brutality work we did was also a school board member, and defending him against the numerous attacks he had as a school board member was absolutely important. Did I think it was going to become our next big thing? No, I didn't. But it's important and temporary that we supported it. In any case, that lays out the general operations of this. But the important thing to remember is the difference between the revolutionary and mass group. I'll get into the details more next week. Well, I'll get into the details more of the revolutionary group next week. And the mass group comes the week after. In any case, thank you so much. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.